it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Fighting the intellectual ideas from faraway distant capitals that want to tell us how to live our lives better than we can live them ourselves. You know, this is something that we do have to combat and we do have to fight. The president's remarks yesterday, some of them were good. The president's remarks on mental health were good. The president's remarks on he was saying yesterday, in the wake of these terrible shootings, these terrible tragedies in Texas and in Ohio, that, you know, hatred is a serious problem in this country. Talked about violent video games. He talked about the fact that, which I think was a great point. A lot of people don't bring that up anymore, but it's not that you can't play video games, but he makes a very good point where he said, we live in a society now where young men can basically separate themselves and compartmentalize themselves away from other human beings, except for these digital encounters. And when you are, you know, looking at violent video games the whole time, it basically devalues human life. So that was a good thing to bring up. When he mentioned, let me see here, I have it pulled up right here, about hate not pulling a mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. I think that was good too. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. It's what he said right after that I have a giant problem with. Joe, cue this up. RealClearPolitics.com. Go ahead and hit play.
They commit acts of violence and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
I agree with that.
Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process. That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders.
There we go.
Today, I'm also directing the Department of Justice to propose...
So those are red flag laws. That's exactly what I was afraid of as we began the show yesterday, that this is where this was headed, these red flag laws, that we now have people saying, look, we can do this, we can institute red flag laws, and we can still protect due process. Folks, I don't know how that's possible. I have doubts. You're going to have to show me how that happens. How can you take away someone's weapons before they've committed a crime? Now, we just had the entire Republican Party unified over the Brett Kavanaugh situation and the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty. I don't care if you say you're going to protect due process. The whole premise behind a red flag law is that someone reports you and you have to justify why you should have your weapons, why you should get to keep your weapons. And so I'm very skeptical of this, and I know many of you are as well. I'm not saying mental health is certainly the problem. And all of these guys were nuts. People around them are going to tell you that these were nuts. All these mass killers, everybody knew there was something wrong with them. Why didn't they say something? It's not like a red flag law would all of a sudden be like, oh, I need to go report this guy. Why? There's plenty of places, plenty of ways you can report these people now. You've got school systems, okay, if we're going to just talk about this generally, that have a hard time removing students that act crazy because because of the courts. I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, we had this here in Arkansas. I think it was down in Valonia, where you had a guy who was making these ridiculous terroristic type threats where he was clearly mentally unstable, and Valonia does the right thing and says, you're not coming back here, and then they get forced to take him back. And the parents are like, well, it's this is our right. Really, it's your right? I mean, and they basically throwing your hands up saying, I mean, I don't know what was going through their heads, but the bottom line is, we're talking about unalienable, God-given rights that are not dispensed from government. They are supposed to be protected by it. And if you go down the Bill of Rights and you look at, first of all, let's say you say something that somebody is offended by and they report you because they don't think you should have guns. Okay, well, that's a violation of your First Amendment right and then eventually your Second Amendment right. Not to mention, we're talking about you haven't been convicted of a crime and they're going to take your possessions. Well, that's a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. Then you talk about due process, and you basically get most of the rest of them. So, are we going to? I want to wait. I want to read whatever they're going to propose. But I'm telling you, if it's anything like Colorado, I mean, they passed this thing, and there's gun groups that are suing. Are we just going to burn the Bill of Rights? Now, listen, I know in the wake of tragedy, people want to do something. We want to correct injustice. We want to correct. But there is no piece of paper. Folks, the biggest, Joe, I want you to look this up. Look it up. You can look it up on the other computer if you want. You can leave this up or whatever. I want to know the largest amount of life lost by domestic terror, because I think it was Oklahoma City. And that was a bomb. I mean, what piece of paper? Okay, well, we took away your guns. If you're mad enough, I mean, the bottom line is, we do have something called, you used to could be committed, right? Okay, which actually confining somebody to the taxpayer expense, confining somebody versus, hey, we're going to take your guns away. We haven't been able to prove anything. And now we're going to send you on home and let you stew about it and let you figure out, oh, really? You took my guns away? Well, I'll build a giant fertilizer bomb then. That doesn't make any sense to me either. This is a big problem. I mean, now, let me kind of cool down for a bit, and let me just tell you that I think the idea that anything is going to get through Congress, there's all kinds of things that could happen between now and then. And, Congress is kind of inept. They really are. And honestly, the Democrat, even if the Republicans were for the red flags laws, which I think some of them are, at the top of the hour, we'll talk about Senator Tom Cotton because apparently he's for it. It was on the front page of the Gazette. But, I mean, the Democrats are so radical that they, and against bipartisanship, that I think they would actually try to, pull the bill further left, just a demagogue situation, just so it would fail, just so they could still use these tragedies to amass and maintain political power. I don't put that past them at all. I mean, they did that with DACA, all of these, dreamers that they claim to care about. The president offered them DACA, offered them pathways to citizenship in exchange for money to build a wall, and the Democrats said, no, thank you. Because they'd rather people be victims and stay victims so that they can be used to maintain or amass political power. So, I mean, will this actually result in red flag laws? I'm skeptical about it because I just don't see. I mean, how is anything going to get through Congress? They don't work well together at all. And there's a ton of work to be done. But you got the August recess and everything else. That being said, we need to condemn dumb ideas when we can. And this is the reason why. Because I was thinking about this all day yesterday. Because I like President Trump. I agree with him most of the time. But I am pro Second Amendment under the idea that the left's goal is to take away guns, is to destroy the Second Amendment. Okay, that is their goal. They don't. I mean, they believe that over in Europe they've disarmed their citizens. Nothing really bad's happened. Okay, now I believe that when you disarm a population, history is crystal clear about what happens to that disarmed population. Your kids and your grandkids are going to be subjugated. People end up, the government starve people after they disarm them. There's mass murder after they disarm them. The 20th century is crystal clear about what governments are capable of after they disarm a population. Knowing this, I'm pro Second Amendment, and I'm so anti-gun regulation because I don't want to be faced with the choice. Now, you men out there, and some women, you might know the choice that you're thinking about. Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever thought about door-to-door gun confiscation and what you would do? Now, I'm not talking about some movie version of, what would you actually do? How many of you would turn them over? How many of you wouldn't? And to not turn them over is, well, you're either going to hide them for a time or there's going to be confrontation. Who wants that? Who wants to get to that point? The left does. The left wants to get to the point where they are able to take your guns, like in New Zealand. I don't want to be there. I don't even want to come close to having to make that decision, like many of you. So let's acknowledge what the left's goal is and understanding, getting to the point where you have that decision that's been made. And please don't think that it's never happened, so it never will. It's never happened in America. Well, it did in Hurricane Katrina. You let a big enough disaster, they were confiscating people's guns. So it can happen in America. It has happened in America. In the right circumstances, it'll happen again. And that's why this idea that, and if you don't think, look, if you had a red flag law, would it possibly stop some of these crazy kids? Maybe. Again, they can just get mad and go home and get some knives. So yeah, it's possible. But you and I both know what would happen with these red flag laws. You'd be carrying a gun in Walmart, or you'd be open carrying somewhere, and some liberal would find out who you are, would harass you because they're offended at the sight of a gun, and then you'd be in front of a court having to defend yourself. Well, Paul, the judges around here, they wouldn't do that. Well, yeah, but what about the judges 10 years from now? This is the problem. This is the problem. It's the psychological relationship between citizen and government. That's what this is. And it is a gradual usurpation. Slowly, right? Well, we'll just do this. It's reasonable. 10 years from now, though, you've got some judge in Arkansas that hates guns, and we probably have some of them now. You know the judges will side with the liberals. You know the judges will side with those who are making unfounded accusations just because they personally disagree with carrying a weapon, and they don't want you to carry a weapon. You know exactly that's what would happen. Everyone's heard of enough frivolous lawsuits, I mean, what do you think would happen if they had the ability? What do you think it would happen during divorces when a wife is uncomfortable that her husband has guns, and also there's been not a less than amicable divorce? What do you think would happen? Red flag laws. That's what would happen. Oh, we'll write it where that won't happen, though. All right, well, let me read it first. Until then, I'm going to be very skeptical. Telephone number 870-275-9799. We got a great show for you. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking to Shelby Emmett. She's a First Amendment attorney, freedom of speech advocate, talking about rhetoric in the country. Our whiteboard a while back was rhetoric, not racism. Then at the bottom of the next hour, Senator Mark Johnson. Senator Mark Johnson was instrumental in getting a building that's close to the Capitol renamed after Governor Winthrop Rockefeller. We're going to talk about that because it's a very interesting history there. So don't go anywhere. Get a great show. We got to talk more about this. I want to hear, what do you think? Have you ever thought about that decision I was just talking about? How we don't even want to get close to that decision. And the left does. I don't want to have to make that decision. I don't want to even have to contemplate. What would I do? Would I give up the guns? Let me know what you think. Facebook.com/Conduit News. Back in a moment. Welcome to the program. It's hour number 2, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're going to spotlight now Cleburne County. I understand that there has been a disruption, or there's a coming disruption later this year in 911 services to the rural parts of, I think, Cleburne County it is. We have more on that right now. We have Cleburne County resident Jackie Martin, also listener of the program, fan of the show. Jackie, how are you?
I'm great, Paul. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you got up with us. I know you're up with us most of the time because I see you on the Facebook feed. And you reached out to the show because you wanted to add, want to get some publicity about, about what? You just tell us the situation. Take it away.
Okay, well, actually, I reached out to you after listening to Joey talk about FOIA because I'm working with him on this issue. Basically, what's happening is the law allows cities to competitively bid for ground ambulance service. And to give you a little background, we have a ground ambulance service out of Searcy, Arkansas, that's called North Star Ambulance. They've provided that service for the Heber Springs Fire District and surrounding fire districts for the last 19 years. And there's been no complaints about them or anything like that. There is another ambulance, it's an air ambulance service out of Batesville called Survival Flight. They have now put forth a proposal, Survival Flight has, to provide ground ambulance service, even though they're not licensed anywhere in the state to provide ground ambulance service. So in a vote on July the 25th, the Heber Springs City Council members voted for the Survival Flight proposal, full well knowing they weren't licensed. And so what that does to the surrounding fire districts is, as of November 15th, we will no longer have ground ambulance service because Heber Springs is key in any ground ambulance service serving Cleburne County so that it remains relatively profitable so that they can continue to operate, okay? So I started just dropping FOIAs everywhere when this thing started bubbling up because the city council didn't put forth a request for proposal, didn't put a list of requirements together, nothing. All of a sudden...
My part-time service in the Army National Guard makes it possible for me to be more for the community.
They held an open meeting as required by law on July the 8th at noon on a work day where both North Star and Survival Flight put forth a presentation in the City Hall room, which only holds 38 people. There were a lot of public people that were interested in the issue that couldn't get into the room to see the presentation. So there's just a lot of cover-up, behind-the-door meetings like Joey was prescribing last
All right,
Friday.
folks, welcome back to the program. Sorry
so
about that.
my FOIA
We had
produced two meetings.
interesting, the interesting stuff happened on the radio side. 870-275-9799 is the telephone number if you would like to be a part of the program. Okay, so a few of these headlines here. Can we talk about, let's go back to the president here. He did say this. Now, again, I agree with a lot of what he said yesterday. Let's go to this Breitbart News reporter, his tweet, Kyle Morris. President Trump, in one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, white supremacy. Let's get a listen to this cut. Go ahead.
Support. Today, we also send the condolences of our nation to President Obrador of Mexico and all the people of Mexico for the loss of their citizens in the El Paso shooting. Terrible, terrible thing. I have also been in close contact with Attorney General Barr and FBI Director Wray. Federal authorities are on the ground, and I have directed them to provide any and all assistance required, whatever is needed. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. We have asked the FBI to identify all further resources they need to investigate and disrupt hate crimes and domestic terrorism, whatever they need.
Again, President Trump yesterday talking about the violence, the mass shootings in Ohio and Texas. He did mention the red flag laws. We'll talk more about that. I know we're going to talk more about that. And all of you are understandably upset about this. Or the comments that I can see. In other news, real quick, because we're going to be up against a hard break. In other news, we have, and we mentioned this yesterday, we played for you the differences between Arkansas's economic development policy, which is very China-focused, versus the foreign policy of the United States. So certainly this headline, Politico, Treasury designates China as a currency manipulator. I actually prefer the zero hedge version. For the first time in 25 years, U.S. Treasury just designated China a currency manipulator. Following the plunge in the yuan, overnight, U.S. Treasury Department on Monday designated China as a currency manipulator, a historic move that no White House has exercised since the Clinton administration. Well, I'm sure they're going to say that it was probably motivated by Trump's bigotry and racism. Secretary Mnuchin, under the auspices of President Trump, has today determined that China is a currency manipulator. As a result of this determination, Secretary Mnuchin will engage with the International Monetary Fund to eliminate the unfair competitive advantage created by China's latest actions. This pattern of actions is also a violation of China's G20 commitments to refrain from competitive devaluation. Now, what's interesting here, and by the way, gold was spiking above $14.85 according to this report. I don't know what it is now. But just a few weeks ago, this is in stark contrast, because just a few weeks ago, the U.S. Treasury report chose not to label China as a currency manipulator, as it only triggered one of the criteria. When China was manipulating its currency stronger for years, not a peep, one day, just one day, it lets it drop to a fair value, according to this tweet, and all hell breaks loose. This is what the Treasury said about China's currency policy. Well, we're up against a hard break, but trade war is certainly ratcheting up. We'll see what happens. Wonder how those deals of those communist Chinese entities are going on moving to Arkansas.
Called or hosted by the county judge one on March the 13th, where 4 mayors of cities in Cleveland County were present, various EMS providers, so-called leaders of EMS providers, the Officer of Emergency Management, the new Heber Springs Fire Chief, and 1 Justice of the Peace. So I FOIA'd all the mayors, and of course the county judge, all the Justices of the Peace, all of the city council people, and out of the county judge's response, I got a sign-in sheet for both the March 13th meeting and the May 9th meeting, in which Survival Flight gave a presentation. And there was, at the May 9th meeting, not only the mayor of Heber Springs, but a city councilwoman was present as well. And, to make a quorum of any governing body, so the county judge and a JP plus city mayor of Heber Springs and a city councilwoman makes a quorum on any issue that could come up before the governing body that they might have a vote on. And amazingly enough, on June the 13th, there was a ordinance read for quorum court to provide the Survival Flight membership group plan to county employees. And, oh, yes, we're going to give it to all the JPs on quorum court as well, at a discounted rate for the county taxpayers to pay for it. And after a lot of discussion, there was a motion made by JP that they would just allow the county employees to continue to enroll in their membership plan at the discounted rate. Of course, I don't get one because I'm just a stupid county taxpayer, so I don't count. So that was kind of tabled. But the point of the fact of the matter is, county judge and the 2 JPs that were at the meetings that he hosted, were voting on this issue at the June meeting. So this is a clear violation of FOIA, and it states in the FOIA law, a quorum of the governing body need not be present for the meeting to be subject to the FOIA. If 2 members meet informally to discuss past or pending business, that meeting may be subject to the FOIA. So the county judge and the JPs are saying, well, it was just information gathering. Well, the AG opinions have something to say about that as well. The AG opinion pretty much says the final result reached by a public body, but rather is a spectrum, including all phases of the process by which an end result.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Okay, so welcome back. Okay, we've been talking this morning about the president and his speech yesterday. But we also had, in the wake of these terrible tragedies in Texas and Ohio, usual rhetoric from the left. I've got this story right here, for example. It's from Politico, headline, Trump rhetoric freshly condemned, talking about, it's just this idea that he is responsible for these 2 guys doing what they did, which I think is absolutely preposterous. I don't know of anyone that directly blamed Barack Obama. There might have been some, but back, when you had the police officers who were murdered at the Black Lives Matter rally, I don't, you know what I mean? That was a tragedy. But everybody wants to assign blame, that's whatever. Both sides do it, but everybody wanted to assign blame. Here to join us, talk a little bit more about this, I want to introduce you to Shelby Emmett. She's a First Amendment attorney, freedom of speech advocate. She's done extensive work. She's a former legislative counsel for members of Congress, responsible for the largest legislative portfolio for the member, including education, immigration, social services, health care, and the judiciary. Also, Shelby is a contributor to Project 21, which is an initiative of the National Center for Public Policy Research to promote the views of African Americans whose entrepreneurial spirit, dedication to family, and commitment to individual responsibility hasn't traditionally been echoed by the nation's civil rights leaders. Shelby, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. So first of all, tell us a little bit about Project 21.
Sure. So basically the idea is to help minority voices have more presence in public policy. Being a conservative, I'm from Detroit originally. Shocker, the Republican Party is a disaster at actually trying to reach new people. And I always say, if I actually had to listen to a conservative when I was growing up, I never would have became one. I became a conservative through my own experience, but a lot of the ways people talk about things just don't resonate for, a young black girl in Detroit. So the whole premise of the organization is just to help encourage more minority voices with different points of view, and also help the public at large understand that, we're not a monolithic group. We have completely different ideas and opinions just like everybody else, and sometimes we even come at it from a different perspective, but utilizing the same conservative principles.
I think that's fantastic. Definitely, we have to communication's key, in any relationship, is that what people always say? Well, you just got to work on your communication. Well, Shelby, what do you make? What do you make of the rhetoric here in the wake of these two tragedies, and balancing that against the First Amendment?
Well, it always scares the First Amendment field whenever a tragedy happens. Yes, it's tragic, and then in itself, of course, is a tragedy. But in my field, we're always concerned about the emotional reaction, because the first thing that people go after is always speech. I think for most people, it's the idea, the concept that something horrible has happened and you want to be able to do something. So the best way to do it is to point a finger, blame a tangible object, and then try to do something about that, right? So this happens on both sides. It did happen when Barack Obama was president. I worked in issues with Black Lives Matter issues, and even if people are saying horrible things about the police officers, someone deciding to hurt a police officer is the responsibility and the actions of that individual, just like here. Regardless of the rhetoric of what anybody is saying, that young man chose to make a decision, and he made those decisions for himself. Nobody forced him to do anything. He did it on his own. So in my field, we're always concerned about this call for hate speech, and now, violent or rhetoric is now violent. And we have to be very careful about that. As a minority, I understand it. I get it. I've had people call me horrible words and say horrible things to me, but that doesn't give me any type of justification to use violence, and we can't excuse it in this situation either.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well put. So, I mean, so this idea is, where we have people saying, this is Donald Trump's fault. There are some that are saying this, that he's responsible for this. Now, I don't even think that necessarily comports with the fact, considering the white supremacist down in Texas said, I think what's funny, if the manifesto's accurate, he said, well, hang on a second, this is not Trump's fault, just so you know, I held these views before Trump. That doesn't seem to matter, some of the reporting is, and there's so many people on the left that really do believe this. They believe that that his rhetoric is responsible for what's happened, and that's just not true. So I agree with what you're saying, Shelby. We have to hold the people who pull the trigger or who actually do the actions responsible.
Exactly, and we all have to be concerned here, because this does go back and forth on both sides. You hear the same talk sometimes on the right whenever anyone criticizes Israel, for example. Simply criticizing something is not automatically anti-Semitic, and you have members on the right that also want to push measures that would make that a potential crime as well, to do any of those things. So we have to be careful on both sides. And I always tell people that you cannot blame rhetoric, because one day you are going to say something. I promise you. We've all been there, and it's happening more and more, that is going to hurt someone's feelings. And the level of sensitivity in American society today is mind-boggling to me. I think the one stereotype that I loved about being an American was that we were just hardworking and we kept going and we were full of grit. And now it just seems like it's in vogue now to just be completely offended by the slightest thing. And I can tell you in my field, you see it more on the left, but it can be very equal opportunity. You've got a whole generation of young people, both conservative and liberal, that just have a very thin skin.
So I'm assuming, being this First Amendment advocate, that you certainly are aware of the freedom of speech issues on college campuses. So can you speak to that at all? That to me is disturbing. When we have these institutions that are supposed to be about freedom of thought, but kind of diminish the First Amendment a little bit.
Exactly. So campus speech issues is something that I probably spend the majority of my time with right now. And it's twofold. So the first basic premise is, yes, on your public campuses. So, for example, I went to Michigan State. Michigan State is a public institution. Public institutions are required to uphold the First Amendment, which means they can't silence people based off content and viewpoint. They can have, proper regulations, but they have to be, reasonable, and they have to apply to everybody, right? Private institutions can do whatever the heck they want. So as much as people may get annoyed with the Ivy Leagues and what they do, at the end of the day, they're private institutions. So we don't really care about that in the First Amendment world. We do in terms of if they promise the free expression of ideas, but in terms of the actual law in the First Amendment, they also have a freedom of association right, which is why institutions like Hillsdale College can do what they would like to do as well. But the problem in college campuses is also cultural, right? This is a problem of hearing too much of the same idea and then being told that anything you don't like to hear is a problem. But it's also a problem that conservatives are also leaving academia, or we don't even try to go into it. So, this idea that, the left controls the academy, it's true, but we also tend not to go into the academy. Now, can it be harder? Yes, but we also never get in there. So it is a twofold problem. Most importantly, though, what I always try to tell conservative parents is, one, stop teaching your children that just because someone doesn't agree with them or the professor may not like the views, that doesn't mean that they're being censored. I'm a black woman from Detroit who was a conservative. I've been called every single name in the book throughout college, law school, and to today, and I've always stood my ground. So just because you're afraid of something or you're afraid of your grade, that's up to you. You still have to decide to have a backbone and stand up for yourself. But I also encourage parents specifically, contact your members of Congress at the state level. Look up the speech codes. There's organizations like thefire.org. You can go to different websites and see where these schools' rankings are, and stop sending your children there. Stop giving your donations to them until your school reforms their codes. My school, Michigan State, doesn't have great codes right now, so I refuse to donate to them. And I write them every year when they write me, and I say, nope, reform your codes, and then we'll talk. So the best way to change the culture here is with the dollar. And parents don't have to keep sending their kids to these institutions. They can demand that these changes are made.
That's a really good point. Yeah, here in Arkansas, we recently passed, State Representative Dan Sullivan and other legislators recently passed freedom of speech on Arkansas college campuses. There was an issue, there's an issue at Arkansas State where there are these freedom of speech zones, and so, and I think there's still a lawsuit pending on that. But there was immediate legislative action, thankfully, that we want to make sure that kids can say what they want to say on a college campus. We're talking
exactly, and a lot of this is the fault of the adults. I always remind people, you can't go after young people for acting like fools until you first hold the college campus president, who's making six figures, accountable, right? Just like you need to hold the campus police accountable, who think it's okay to detain a student for holding the Constitution and trying to pass them out. You don't go after the 19-year-old private citizen until you go after the public official who thinks it's up to him to pick and choose what students are allowed to be exposed to.
We're talking with Shelby Emmett. She is a First Amendment attorney. And she's also, very experienced, has, quite the resume. It says here, Shelby, before working on Capitol Hill, you worked for a public health nonprofit responsible for policy development and implementation. It included advocacy for the state and federal policymakers. Also, you've appeared with the Daily Caller, frequent guest on national, television shows. And I really was in, prepping for this interview, Shelby. I went and, watched some of your appearances, and I really think you're terrific, and appreciate the points that you make, and really appreciate you coming on the program this morning. It's been great to meet you. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I would love to come back on. You guys have a great, fabulous day.
You too. You too. Shelby Emmett, everybody. We're going to make a smaller YouTube video of this. We'll put it up. It'll be up at conduitnews.com here in just a moment. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back here. Don't go anywhere.
Called or hosted by the county judge. One on March the 13th, where 4 mayors of cities in Cleveland County were present, various EMS providers, so-called leaders of EMS providers, the Officer of Emergency Management, the new Heber Springs Fire Chief, and one Justice of the Peace. So I FOIA'd all the mayors, and of course the county judge, all the Justice of the Peace, all of the city council people, and out of the county judge's response, I got a sign-in sheet for both the March 13th meeting and the May 9th meeting, in which Survival Flight gave a presentation. And there was, at the May 9th meeting, not only the mayor of Heber Springs, but a city councilwoman was present as well. And, to make a quorum of any governing body, so the county judge and the JP plus city mayor of Heber Springs and a city councilwoman makes a quorum on any issue that could come up before the governing body that they might have a vote on. And amazingly enough, on June the 13th, there was a ordinance read for quorum court to provide the Survival Flight membership group plan to county employees. And, oh, yes, we're going to give it to all the JPs on quorum court as well,
Wow.
at a discounted rate for the county taxpayers to pay for it. And after a lot of discussion, there was a motion made by JP that they would just allow the county employees to continue to enroll in their membership plan at the discounted rate. Of course, I don't get one because I'm just a stupid county taxpayer, so I don't count. So that was kind of tabled. But the point of the fact of the matter is, county judge and the 2 JPs that were at the meetings that he hosted, were voting on this issue at the June meeting. So this is a clear violation of FOIA, and it states in the FOIA law, a quorum of the governing body need not be present for the meeting to be subject to the FOIA. If 2 members meet informally to discuss past or pending business, that meeting may be subject to the FOIA. So the county judge and the JPs are saying, well, it was just information gathering. Well, the AG opinions have something to say about that as well. The AG opinion pretty much says the final result reached by a public body, but rather is a spectrum including all phases of the process by which an end result is achieved, including deliberations, discussions, and information gathering, are subject to FOIA. So what I'm saying is, unless you're engaged in
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hello. Wow. So, last night, you know where I was, Joe? You know where I went? I went last night to the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. And they had, for those of you who don't know, Jonesboro has a special election to raise the sales tax, by 1 full cent, coming up on September the 10th. And there is a group of concerned citizens that formed to promote this tax, and they have a presentation. They're called Team Jonesboro, and they have a presentation, and they wanted to give it and present it to the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party, which, first of all, I just have to commend them for coming, and I appreciate it very much. I appreciated they're willing to engage in it wasn't so much of a debate, although, there was, I believe, a congenial exchange of ideas. But it was just their presentation, meaning these were their arguments. So they had a PowerPoint presentation. They were going over some statistics on crime. They had statistics on crime. They had statistics on the number of people who are moving to Jonesboro over the last 10 years and how many of them actually fall under the poverty line. And it was interesting. They had a lot of it seemed to be there's a consensus, at least among that group, that it's hard to recruit professionals to Jonesboro and keep them here because now hear me out, because we don't have things like bike trails, water parks, things like that, children's museums, everything, because they've come up with a list of things that half of this 1 cent sales tax will be used for. Half of it will be used for police and fire, and the other half will be used for quality of life amenities, water parks, things like that. Now, I thought their presentation was good in terms of you can make a reasoned argument for more taxes. But I will tell you this, and this was how I would write the headline if I was writing a headline on this. There was some discussion brought up about what happened in the local government 10 years ago, or maybe, was it 10 years ago? Yeah, 10 years ago, where they passed a half-cent sales tax for police and fire. And there was an allegation made that the half-cent sales tax for police and fire did not actually go to increase the funding for crime prevention, hiring new officers, hiring new detectives, getting a new radio system. It just went to maintain. And so there was somebody that said something about a shell game. I've talked about it. I was here 10 years ago. I had just started doing what I'm doing now 10 years ago. And I remember this. I was on one station in Jonesboro, and it was a shell game. They passed the tax. It passed half cent to police and fire. Well, police and fire was already being funded. So then they took the money that was already being used for police and fire, and they spent it wherever else they wanted to. And then they got this. You see what they did there? So there were people who were concerned that this new endeavor that's supposed to fund police and fire, which everybody in the Tea Party, by the way, supported for the most part. Everybody seemed to say, yeah, we can see the headlines. We know that there's a crime problem. We know that we want to stop the crime. We know we want more police. Everybody seemed to be on board with that. Really, the debate was the amenities. But I'll tell you, the common ground that was had was Team Jonesboro definitely wants this half-cent sales tax, the half that's supposed to go to police and fire. They want it to actually go to police and fire. They want it to increase the budget for police and fire. They don't want a shell game. And the members seem to basically volunteer, or the people who are representing Team Jonesboro seem to agree that if the city council spends this money in some other way other than to give the police and fire an increase, that they would go after the city council members and find opponents for them to get them thrown out of office. Which, I thought was headline worthy. I thought that was to me, that was kind of what stood out. After hearing their presentation, a lot of people, including myself, are very skeptical about the motivations of Team Jonesboro. And by the way, tomorrow we'll be talking with Alderman. We'll be talking with with Alderman Bobby Long. He'll be here tomorrow at 7:30 to discuss this further. But I do believe that Team Jonesboro is sincere. I may disagree with them. I may not want to pay any more tax, which I don't. But I do believe they are sincere, and based on what they said, I think They actually did form. I think they've had plans. I think they've had discussions about what they should do. That's obvious. That's all. I mean, they've got their list. But I actually do think that Team Jonesboro formed because they are so upset with the decisions that the Jonesboro City Council has made with the money they have. Now, you might say, well, that's pretty weird because, now they're asking for more money. They've misspent, and so they want to give the same people more money. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that. But there was a clear frustration among Team Jonesboro with some of the decisions that the city council and the mayor have made in this town. Now, I wish, in thinking of that, I was kind of sitting there thinking, well, I wish some of the people in Team Jonesboro would challenge these guys, would run for city council then. I mean, that's one way to do it, instead of, asking us to, pay more in taxes, and maybe they would. Now, that's the other thing here. I don't know why there wasn't any lobbying, and I don't know if there was or there wasn't, but I wonder, was there any lobbying these city council people just to pass a tax increase on their own? I mean, that's something that actually can do. City council could just raise the taxes right now if they really needed it. But anyway, hindsight's 20/20. I'll just say this. Well, we'll talk about this more tomorrow. I thought it was a good event. It was very nice of them to come and talk to us and kind of face what, I mean, I don't think I wouldn't describe it as hostile, but it was a contentious crowd. They certainly wanted to contend with them wanting, more money for the government. And it was good. They answered questions. They asked us questions. And I appreciate them showing up. I appreciate them coming. If you're just joining us, I'm talking about Team Jonesboro yesterday. Representatives from Team Jonesboro, they came to the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party, and they gave a presentation, and they were trying to basically sway members of that group, saying, hey, this is why the tax, please go tell your friends, this is why the tax is necessary. And, there was people in the Tea Party that were saying, in their questions, look, I think some of these projects are fine. I just don't know. I just don't think we need to be, taxing the people more. There were some people talking about the fixed incomes that they were on, talking about how, we really just can't afford this. Although Team Jonesboro had a figure, and I don't know how they got to their estimates. I'd want to see that. But one of their figures was, this will just cost the average family an extra $9 a month, So they definitely had, I would say it was a good presentation. It didn't convince me, but I did appreciate them coming and engaging in a debate. And here's the thing. Here's what I know for sure. Police and fire, passing a tax increase for police and fire would be a no-brainer by itself. People would do that. I mean, they would do it in a heartbeat. I mean, it is what it is. And but now they've combined it, you see, and it's very much like what happens in legislation down in Little Rock, and I've seen it 100 times, where you have an idea that's not really that popular, and you pair it with an idea that is, to try to get it passed or to put people in this between the rock and a hard place, because people want safe communities, right? People want a stronger police presence if you need it. They might not necessarily want to subsidize other hobbies, but there was the good argument, about recruiting professionals. I mean, they had all of that there, and we're going to talk more about that tomorrow on the program, 7:33 with Alderman Bobby Long, and also, by the way, I reached out to Team Jonesboro, and after the meeting, and invited them on the program if they would like to come on and talk about this tax increase. So. Anyway, just a little local flair there. Pretty interesting times we live in. I will say this, if you're... Everybody seemed to uniformly condemn the tax policy coming out of Little Rock because it makes it harder for local governments to raise money.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Your local government, they're going to pull this stuff on you all the time.
Well,
so you better know your FOIA law and be able to slap FOIA on them. So I've been slapping FOIA on everybody, kind of like pollen during spring. That's what I've been doing.
Well, I think that's a good thing. And if it wasn't, for people like you, Jackie, there'd be a lot. If there's got to be opposition. We know the tendency of government, and it is not. People don't want to be transparent, but this has real world consequences. So what I'm not clear.
Yeah, people could die.
Right, exactly,
much.
right. So what I'm not clear on though is the lack of ground ambulance service to Cleburne County. Okay, so they have now officially contracted with an air ambulance company that doesn't have a ground ambulance license. So does that mean no one is going to have an ambulance? I mean, and will Heber Springs still have one, a ground ambulance?
Oh yeah, it's an exclusive franchise contract only for Heber Springs city limits. No one outside of Heber Springs. This is what they said on July 25th. There was a meeting that was open to the public. They gave 30 minutes for public comment, three minutes per person. It was extremely obvious that the decision had already been made before that meeting. There were two city council people said, I don't care about county people. I'm only concerned with city people. And yet we were accused, the public was accused of being divisive. I think that's called transference. I'm pretty sure that's what that's called. But, what Survival Flight is saying, oh, you know what, we're in the process of getting a license. Well, where's the responsibility of the so-called elected officials making sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted before they make a decision on anything of this magnitude? Do they not feel any responsibility to the public at large, regardless of where they live in the community?
What about the quorum court? What about the county judge? I mean, what are they doing now? I mean, do they know that in November, I mean, there may not be ambulance service for the folks in the county? Oh
yeah, they know, and they are discussing it. There's been 3 JPs who've been rather proactive and held a town hall meeting in one of the communities outside of Heber Springs that I attended. And both North Star and Survival Flight were allowed to present and to take questions from the audience there. And it was very obvious to me what was being said, and talked about what the Heber Springs City Council was doing, and the mayor and the new fire chief mainly, that this was already a done deal. They had already made up their minds. They didn't care what people had to say. They weren't holding town hall meetings around the community to get input from the community. There was not like I said, there was not a request for proposal. There wasn't a list of requirements to put together to send out to several ambulance providers, not just the current one and one new one. How about let's send it out to several? And when I FOIA'd, I requested that and was told there was no RFP done.
This is so.
And in fact,
go ahead.
In fact, on the July 25th meeting, one of the city council members made a motion to scrap the 2 proposals to start all over, do it the right way by putting out a request for a proposal with a list of their needs for their community. And it was a tie vote because there's 8 members on the city council, and the mayor would not vote to break the tie. So city councilman gave him an out, and he refused to take it.
This is strange to me, and the reason is because there are people, whether I like it or not, there are people on the right and the left, obviously on the left, where, when it comes to somebody's health care, and I'm going to put a contract with an ambulance service for the rural people that live in Cleburne County, I'm going to put that right up there and with health care. That's what it is. You don't mess with that. You know what I mean? Like most people, most politicians, right? They're like, we're not going to take that away from somebody, right? Because number one, it's healthcare. It's a very, very hot button, whether I agree with it or not, issue. And yet
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
It is hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. This is Conduit News, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to get to those comments in a moment. Let's start this hour. By the way, Senator Mark Johnson, Senator MJ. I like to call him Senator MJ. He's coming on the program, coming up at 7:33. We're going to talk a little history, a little Rockefeller history. We'll talk about this new building name. You'll understand when we have him on why I wanted to have him on. Let's see here. All right. So over the weekend, there was an announcement made that actually, I think, contributed to another announcement. Senator Jason Rapert is going to be running for lieutenant governor in 2022. Okay. Michael Wickline reported Senator Rapert, he's from Conway, said Friday that he plans to run for lieutenant governor. Quote, I am ready to contribute at another level. I think there is more that I can do. I would love to support the next governor. So this is interesting. So we have the next long paragraph. The current lieutenant governor, Republican Tim Griffin, has served in the post since 2010 and will be barred from running in 2022 because of term limits. Griffin has said he's considering running for governor in 2022. Republican Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, Senate President Pro Tem Jim Hendren, and former Trump administration spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee also have signaled that they are weighing a bid for governor in 2022. So, because Senator Rapert announced that he's running for lieutenant governor, we have this headline posted yesterday. This one's yesterday from 5 News Online. We'd like to send you notifications for the latest news and updates. No, thank you. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin says he will run for governor in 2022. That's now official. According to reports, multiple reports are now saying that on Monday, he confirmed that he is seeking his party's nomination for governor. Says he'll discuss his candidacy in more detail later. That's 5 News Online. But then there was another one. Let me see here. He responded, I think, are you running? And I think it was absolutely was his response. That was the initial one. So, yeah. Tim Griffin asked whether he is still considered running for governor in 2020, replied in an email. Oh, cut it off right there. Let's see here. Hang on one second. Lieutenant Governor, let's see here. This one's about Raypert. Then Lieutenant Governor asked whether he's still considering to run for governor. Replied in an email to the question of, am I running? My quote is, absolutely. So, there, I just wanted to get that. I wanted to make sure. So Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin will be running for governor after Governor Hutchinson is term limited out. So in 2022. Now, listen, I know a lot of you, no one cares about 2022 yet, right? Why would you? We've got a huge election coming up next November. Huge. But there's a lot of people, talking, a lot of people trying to figure out what are things going to look like in Arkansas. And so you have the wheels of power kind of turning. People are speculating, right? It's no secret that Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin has been the favorite to, that he has essentially been the front runner. Everyone has assumed that, yes, Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin will be the next governor. And I really don't think that there's anything, unless, of course, Sarah Huckabee were to announce. I don't think, there's really anything that is going to change that on the horizon. So, but I do think it's interesting. I mean, I wonder if this was the actual time. It's just speculation. Was this the time that Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin was going to announce, or was it because of Senator Raypert announced that it was kind of like a domino effect? You get the question asked and everything else. I don't know. I don't think. I'm wondering if there will be any sort of anybody else that wants the lieutenant governor's position, Senator Raypert. There's been people, politicos, telling me for a long time that that's what he was wanting to do. That's what he was wanting to run for. So there's a lot of people that if I knew he was going to run, which I did, then there's a lot of other people that know. And a lot of other people probably, made the decision. Now, I will tell you this: the fact that Senator Raypert's running for lieutenant governor is going to absolutely drive the left in this state insane. I mean, that would be fun to watch. Politically on certain votes. I have had differences with Senator Raypert on the social issues. No difference in terms of his voting record, and in terms of his pro-life stance is really, 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 really good on economic freedom issues of does it grow government? Then the answer is no. Does it spend money we don't have? Then the answer is no. Does it increase dependency on government? The answer is no. Have some differences there, but it is what it is. But anyway, we'll continue to monitor this and let you know. I didn't expect this early, but people definitely are going to be trying to get out in front of things. Telephone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. As far as Tim Griffin goes, I'll say this. I think Tim, if you go listen to his message, have you guys ever listened to Tim's message on, sorry, I had a camera fall over. That's not good. If you've ever listened to the lieutenant governor give a speech on cutting spending and everything else, it's fantastic. And I that's where we've got to get to, by the way. So far, out of the announced candidates to replace Asa Hutchinson, yeah, Tim Griffin is it, man. I mean, I've listened to him give speeches. I've listened to, I've talked to him as well personally. And I know that Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin understands one thing, that spending in Arkansas has got to be reined in. It has to be. And that is something that we have been saying here for a very, very long time, that we spend way too much money in Arkansas. and that you have to get spending under control. Lieutenant Governor Griffin was in the House when he was serving in Congress up in D.C. He was on the House Ways and Means Committee. I mean, so the guy knows a thing or two about budgeting. And I really think that's what we are missing here in Arkansas. I mean, there's a reason why we have a $70 million net tax increase on the people of Arkansas in fiscal year 2020. There's a reason why we have all the tax increases kicking in now, but the tax cuts don't happen for several years. And it's because we don't have the fiscal discipline to stop continuing to spend more and more and more and more money here in Arkansas every single year. If you would not spend the money, then you wouldn't have to raise taxes on the people. Conversely, you can look at it from another angle. In Arkansas, the tax policy drives the spending. Because of the Revenue Stabilization Act, which I love, it also guarantees that people can just throw in pet projects that they don't know are going to get funded or not. Not pet projects, but sort of. And if the money comes in, if the economy's booming and you have a good year and the government gets all this extra collections, well, eventually that money can filter down from Category A to Category B to Category C, and it ensures you're going to spend everything you take in. That's a problem, right? So if Arkansas had something called a Tabor Amendment, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, it would actually, just passing that alone and leaving the Revenue Stabilization Act alone, but, well, for the most part, but also making them mesh with a Taxpayer Bill of Rights that says if the government gets X amount of dollars more, some percentage of that has got to be sent back to the people in the form of tax relief. It could really, really work out well for the size of government, because you see, if we could just get and this is if I was emperor, I would go through and I would cut so much you wouldn't even believe it. There's so many things that I would cut if I were emperor, okay? But I'm not emperor. As Joe's laughing in there. But if you can just get government to stay relatively the same size that it is now and have economic growth, technically the government, I'm talking about GDP, technically the government has gotten smaller, right? Because citizens have expanded. And the government it exists because we exist first, not the other way around. That's an important thing to note. It's an important thing to note. We're going to take a break. We're going to reset. We have your meme of the day coming up at 7:50. We have Senator Mark Johnson coming up at 7:33. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about red flag laws. This on the front page of the Gazette this morning. Senator Cotton supports law to keep mentally ill from acquiring guns. Now, again, the president yesterday said some good things I agree with. I think some really good things. But on the red flag end, I don't see how. Now, somebody might be able to tell me. I don't know how you have red flag laws without violating most of the Bill of Rights. Let me know what you think. Back in just a moment.
That I attended, and both North Star and Survival Flight were allowed to present and to take questions from the audience there. And it was very obvious to me what was being said and talked about what the Heber Springs City Council was doing and the mayor and the new fire chief, mainly, that this was already a done deal. They had already made up their minds. They didn't care what people had to say. They weren't holding town hall meetings around the community to get input from the community. There was not like I said, there was not a request for proposal. There wasn't a list of requirements to put together to send out to several ambulance providers, not just the current one and one new one. How about let's send it out to several? And when I FOIA'd, I requested that and was told there was no RFP. done.
This is so.
And in fact,
go ahead.
In fact, on the July 25th meeting, one of the city council members made a motion to scrap the two proposals to start all over, do it the right way by putting out a request for a proposal with a list of their needs for their community. And it was a tie vote because there's 8 members on the city council, and the mayor would not vote to break the tie. So city councilman gave him an out, and he refused to take it.
This is strange to me, and the reason is because there are people, whether I like it or not, there are people on the right and the left, obviously on the left, where, when it comes to somebody's health care, and I'm going to put a contract with an ambulance service for the rural people that live in Cleveland County, I'm going to put that right up there and with health care. That's what it is. You don't mess with that. You know what I mean? Like most people, most politicians, right? They're like, we're not going to take that away from somebody, right? Because number one, it's healthcare. It's a very, very hot button, whether I agree with it or not, issue. And yet they've done that here. And so that's why this was such a red flag to me. I'm like, something's not adding up because, this is not supposed to be, this is not normal, I guess. When a government is acting, with some sort of predetermined outcome to take away health care, that you don't see that very often.
No, you don't, and especially, you see, I've been life-flighted before. My husband and I were in an ATV accident in 2008, and I was life-flighted, and my health care insurance paid $5,000 of the bill, and we got stuck with $20,000. That's why I'm never without a membership to an AirEvac program, and I just paid my AirEvac plan, and now I'm being told that Survival Flight will be the first one called, and if I don't buy a membership for them too, I won't be covered. And now the cost of an AirEvac plan is over $40,000.
Wow.
So, people need to know that, and I've asked city council, who's going to pay me back the $110 I'm out, because I paid $45 for my North Star membership. Who's going to pay me for that? No, there's no response.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So the president, he's going to be going to Texas or El Paso at some point, going to give a speech. I agree with Dinesh D'Souza, who tweeted that the president should talk about white supremacy and give a history lesson about where it came from, the Democrat Party. I think that's a great idea. I don't know about you guys. Front page here, or at least it was on the front page of the Gazette on the online version. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton told a group of law enforcement officers on Monday that Congress can cooperate to pass legislation aimed at keeping firearms out of the hands of the mentally ill. Quote, I hope we can agree that we need better mental health procedures and policies in this country. Many states have done that as well. I think we should look at it. He's talking about, he called on Congress to make it easier for law enforcement and others to go to a judge and present evidence from family members or neighbors that a young person shouldn't have access to firearms. Okay, so that is a red flag law. Cotton was speaking after mass shootings this week in El Paso. Quote, these shootings are terrible atrocities, he said. One common thread in these shootings, not only in the United States but in other countries, is young, angry, and alienated young men, oftentimes with mental health problems, he said. Now, then it mentions his opponent, Josh Mahoney. Mahoney, wasn't that the name of the guy from Police Academy? Mahoney, I think it was. Anyway, just Josh Mahoney has no chance of winning again. Josh Mahoney is this, I was going to say, alleged opponent of Tom Cotton. The alleged opponent. He has absolutely no chance. Can we talk about that for a minute? Joshua Mahoney has absolutely no chance to beat Tom Cotton at all, period. Like, not a chance, right? The election will be called at 7:30. They will call it for Senator Cotton. It's over. And he has also, by the way, has a fundraiser, I think, today at lunch at Omar's in Jonesboro, which is a very, very nice place. Anyway, I think Senator Cotton does a great job. I really do. I would disagree with him, respectfully disagree with him here. I mean, I think something's got to be done about mental health. Don't get me wrong. But in all of these instances with red flag law, in all of these instances with these mass shootings, it's like everybody knew that there was something wrong with these kids, and yet they still didn't say anything, right? In some cases, you have what happened in Valonia, okay? I mean, let's fix that problem, right? Let's fix that problem where they were trying to remove a kid who had clearly weird stuff, putting dots over people's heads or whatever he was doing on Facebook. The kid should have been removed. There was clear, and yet, the court said, no, you gotta take this kid back. You can't suspend him. You can't kick him out of your school. Are you serious? Like, let's fix that problem, because that was an example of the community of Valonia looking out for everybody else and saying, this guy right here, something wrong with him. Something wrong. Okay? And maybe the embarrassment and shame might actually do something to, oh, really? You know what? I need to quit. I'm going to quit this behavior. This is not normal. Okay? But I don't see how taking somebody to court based on an accusation and then making them, that's what a red flag law is, making them prove their innocence, making them prove and justify why they need the right to a gun. I can just see, quite frankly, liberals abusing this. You're going to get to a point where you have somebody who is, just doesn't like the sight of guns, somebody carrying a gun. And maybe you can write the legislation to where that doesn't happen. But I just am extremely skeptical of it. I really am. I mean, think about this for a second. Your First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. Okay, so what if you say something, right, that somebody doesn't like? This guy shouldn't have guns. He said something I don't believe in. All right, that's a First Amendment right violation, a Second Amendment right violation. Now we're going to come take your guns. You have done nothing wrong. We think you might, but you have done nothing wrong. We're going to come take your weapons. Oh, and by the way, 168 people died in Oklahoma City bombing. Homegrown domestic terrorism. 168 people died. 168 people. Fertilizer bomb. Not gun, fertilizer bomb. The only thing a red flag law is going to do, in my opinion, is hurt law-abiding citizens. They killed a guy up in Maryland. They killed him. Had a red flag law. Showed up to his house, take his guns. Police shot him dead. He didn't want to give up his weapons. Well, he should have complied. Really? Should he have complied? Well, this just proves that he didn't need the weapons in the first place. Really? Does it? See, I don't think it does. I'm not going to make that leap. It's an unalienable right of self-defense. He had been convicted of nothing, and people are showing up to violate his Fourth Amendment and his Second Amendment. And we're surprised that there was somebody that was willing to say, no, you're not going to take my guns. I said this last hour, and I'll say it again. I think this is important to say again. The left in this country wants to confiscate our weapons eventually. It's a gradual redefining of the definition, the relationship between citizen and government. It's gradual. That's what they want. They want gun confiscation, right? And me as a husband, me as a father, I'm thinking down the road here. I am. I'm thinking. Are you thinking? Are you thinking 20 steps down the road? I don't ever want to have to make the decision. What if? I don't want to ever have to make the decision between turning over my guns and not turning over my guns. Do you know what I mean? You know that decision? Thomas Jefferson said the beauty of the Second Amendment is if they try to take it away, that's when it'll be the most valuable to people. But how many of you would give up your guns if the government told you that you should? To me. And the reason is because there are people, whether I like it or not, there are people on the right and the left, obviously on the left, where, when it comes to somebody's health care, and I'm going to put a contract with an ambulance service for the rural people that live in Cleveland County, I'm going to put that right up there and with health care. That's what it is. You don't mess with that. You know what I mean? Like most people, most politicians, right? They're like, we're not going to take that away from somebody, right? Because number one, it's healthcare. It's a very, very hot button, whether I agree with it or not, issue. And yet they've done that here. And so that's why this was such a red flag to me. I'm like, something's not adding up because, this is not supposed to be this is not normal, I guess. When a government is acting, with some sort of predetermined outcome to take away health care, that you don't see that very often.
No, you don't, and especially, you see, I've been life flighted before. My husband and I were in an ATV accident in 2008, and I was life flighted, and my health care insurance paid $5,000 of the bill, and we got stuck with $20,000. That's why I'm never without a membership to an AirEvac program, and I've just paid my AirEvac plan. And now I'm being told that Survival Flight will be the first one called, and if I don't buy a membership for them too, I won't be covered. And now the cost of an AirEvac plan is over $40,000.
Wow.
So, people need to know that, and I've asked City Council, who's going to pay me back the $110 I'm out, because I paid $45 for my North Star membership. Who's going to pay me for that? No, there's no response. And I told them, I said, you know what? I used to do corporate benefits for 35 years, and whenever we had an open enrollment where we changed the vendor for a group plan, we made sure that it aligned with the next open enrollment, so nobody was out any money for participating in a plan. And that's the way it's supposed to be done. But now it's like, we don't care about county people. We're only concerned with city people, with no guarantee that the state is going to grant them a license for ground ambulance. Even the city is at risk of not having any ground ambulance service. And of course, Survival Flight is saying no one's going to be without an ambulance, blah, 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 blah. Well, the problem is that they're only going to purchase 4 ambulances, which they haven't purchased yet. They haven't hired the staff for. They haven't trained the staff for. But North Star has a backfill of 17 ambulances. So, like, let's say there's 3 ambulances in Heber Springs, and we got a big hole, 40,000-acre hole in our county that divides the county, and that's Ferris Lake. So, just last week, there were all the ambulances that are in Heber Springs were on call.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
This is actually a really good point. Remember when we had a government that initiated a media blitz? Only you can prevent forest fires. God forbid we use this logic against evil people. And that actually is a great idea. Talking about mental health and shootings and, reports. That actually is a really good idea. I like that. Folks, let me go over changing topics here for a moment. So I didn't realize this, but the building that's very close to the Capitol grounds was a site back in 1967. Well, when Governor Winthrop Rockefeller, when he took office in 1967, he used a penthouse. Well, it was his penthouse home, this building that's kind of on the grounds of the Capitol there. And the building has now been renamed the Winthrop Rockefeller Building. This was done via legislation by Senator Mark Johnson, MJ. Senator MJ. Mark, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Paul. How are you doing this morning?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. It's always great to talk to you, and I just wanted to have you on. Maybe we can do a little history lesson here. You can educate us. First of all, just tell us about the legislation, and I know it was officially renamed last week, and the ceremony went well, I'm sure.
It went very well, Paul. I was thrilled with the people that came. The governor came along. The Rockefeller family was there. It was just a kind of a celebration, and as I said at the time, it was for me, it was like coming full circle. That building does have an interesting history. I have recently learned that architectural students from around the country come to view that building. It's an example of the international style, and I have just exhausted my total knowledge of that, but that's what I was told. The building was built in the mid-50s. Actually, Paul, I asked my dad once, people may not know, my dad was a senator when he was very, very young, and I became a senator when I was 64, so it gives you an idea of how our lives were different. But I asked him, I said, when you were in the Senate, did you ever vote for a bill that you regret voting for? He says, 2. He said, 1 was the Mack-Blackwell Amendment, which created the Independent Highway Commission. I can talk about that another day, perhaps. The other was he sat on a committee that approved the building of what was then called the National Old Line Insurance Company building. And he didn't really have a problem with the building. I don't know if he liked it or not, but he had a problem with the fact that it ruined the view coming up Capitol Avenue toward the Capitol. It kind of cut off the left side of the Capitol in the view. But that building's been there now for, over 70 years, and or almost 70 years. It's now on the National Register of Historic Places. It was originally called the National Old Line Insurance Company building. The leadership of that company, especially a gentleman named W.E. Bill Darby, had that building built, and that was their headquarters. Later, that company was sold to a Dutch insurance company called Aegon, and so for many years it was called the Aegon Building, A-E-G-O-N. And that was, a lot of people knew it by that name. And I think it's almost 15 years ago, the state bought the building for offices. It's now under the auspices of the Arkansas Building Authority. And let me take a moment and say I can't say enough about working with them. They're great people. Ann Laidlaw is the director. And under the new transformation, Amy Fetcher is the secretary of I think it's called Shared Services, and she's worked carefully to help us pull that off. But the building is historic from the Rockefeller family sense, in that in 1967, Governor Rockefeller was sworn in, and the governor's mansion needed work. It was truly in bad shape, and actually one of my very dear friends is Philip McMath, who actually lived in the governor's mansion. He's Governor Sid McMath's son. And he told me about some of the problems with the place, because the legislature appropriated so much money to build the mansion, and when it was built, it was, they ran out of money. So some of the things they needed to do weren't done. Governor Rockefeller, being wealthy, he said, well, I'm not going to put up with that. So he just said, I'm going to live in the penthouse of this building across the street for the next 6 months or so, and then I'm going to pay to have the mansion renovated, and that's exactly what he did. So he lived on the top floor. It's a beautiful view looking across the way at the Capitol. That suite is now the offices of the Arkansas State University system in Little Rock, and they were kind enough to host a reception after the dedication ceremony last week. But that's sort of the history of the building, the connection with Governor Rockefeller. When the state bought it, they simply named it the 501 building. It's located at 501 Woodlane Street. And I thought, well, that's just about as nondescript a name as anything you come up with. Is that the area code? Did they name it after the area code?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so I literally was still on the Senate floor in kind of a routine time, and something was mentioned about the building or something. I got to think, that building should be named for Governor Rockefeller. He lived there. So I had the bill drafted. It passed unanimously, and we were able last week to have a ceremony that dedicated it. I was thrilled that Paul Rockefeller Jr., who's the son of the late Lieutenant Governor, and of course the grandson of Governor Rockefeller, who's also my neighbor. He's one of my next door neighbors, and great guy. He actually spoke, and his brother Will and his mom Lisa Ann were there, and it was just really a nice celebration of bringing people together.
Yeah, and I've talked about Governor Rockefeller, many times. His legacy, I think the Freedom of Information Act is just fantastic. It's one of the best Freedom of Information Act laws in the country. The level of transparency that provides for the citizens is certainly something. I think that's worth remembering that he wanted to get that through. We're talking
absolutely, Paul. And could I mention one quick thing about that? Again, in my remarks, I talked about this coming full circle. Some people, your listeners know, others don't, that my dad was the person who Governor Rockefeller defeated in the 1966 general election. He was a Democratic nominee. He was a conservative Democrat, and it fought the establishment of the Faubus machine. And Governor Rockefeller, in many ways, paralleled that. They were different in other ways, but when my dad was on the Supreme Court, he wrote a landmark decision that was referenced many times before the Freedom of Information Act, saying that the access to public records should not be denied to the people, and it was essential for our form of government for people to be able to access public records. You actually had a Secretary of State who wouldn't give over certain public records to persons that were looking to research them.
So that's interesting. So your dad, your father, the late Senator Jim Johnson, right? His name's Jim?
Right, and he was actually Justice Jim Johnson, who was on the Supreme Court, of course, when he wrote that opinion. Okay, yeah. So very accomplished, your father.
And so talk a little bit about that, in terms of the fact that he was the Democrat, Rockefeller was the Republican. That really does kind of make it full circle if you kind of think about it. Then the son of Rockefeller's opponent ends up naming a building after him. That's interesting. That's his.
And I left out one thing. And the late Lieutenant Governor Win Paul Rockefeller. My daughter actually worked in his office, so we have a family connection. We're friends, but as I said, it's Arkansas. Everybody seems to know everybody. It's just that wonderful small state that everyone. We have connections to people, and that's one of the beautiful things about our state.
Okay, well, while I have you said maybe we'll save it for another day, but let's talk about your dad. And you said he had two bills that he ever regretted voting for. Let's talk about the one that you mentioned, the highway, right? The creation of the Independent Highway Commission, right?
Yeah, Paul, we had a scandal back in the early 50s that there had been an audit of the highway department, and there had been some problems found, and it was rather scandalous. And as people tend to do sometimes, there was an overreaction. And a constitutional amendment was proposed by the legislature to take the highway department out from under the governor and create this independent commission with a commissioner from each of the at that time 5 congressional districts. And that's what we have now. And my dad's logic was simply, they said at the time, we're going to take the highway commission out of politics. And he said, well, you can't ever take anything completely out of politics, but what you do is you take it away from the people. And, and this is not a reflection on the staff of the highway department, RDOT, or the commissioners individually themselves, but the fact is that there is this extra buffer between the public and the highway commission. I actually had a commissioner within the last year say to me that, we're independent businessmen. We have a real life, and we just sort of rubber stamp what the staff provides us with, and it's just not a good way to run things, probably. But the fact is that was, we've had a lot of overreactions to things, in Arkansas. But there are folks that say the Game and Fish Commission, same thing. We had literally decimated our wildlife, and so people came up with this idea, well, let's create an independent commission to take it out of politics. Well, I'm not saying, again, that the Game and Fish Commission staff is not doing a good job on things. Sometimes they do. Sometimes maybe there's a problem. But this idea that you fix things by taking them out of politics, you have to look at that very carefully, because often all you're doing is taking it away from the direct oversight of the people and their elected representatives.
That's a really good point, Mark, because, let's just take Game and Fish. I had never really understood your point about the Highway Commission. Very well taken. Removing it from politics removes us from having to say. But there are whispers from people that I talk to. They would love to elect Game and Fish, officers or Game and Fish commissioners. And, you say that to some people and they're like, absolutely not, But if we can't pretend that if you get appointed to some commission or agency that all of a sudden you're infallible, right? And the people need to, I think they need to be able to take swift action, and the government responds by having new people in positions of power.
Well, Paul, it's interesting that you had mentioned a moment ago about the Freedom of Information Act. A few years ago, the Game and Fish Commission tried to, in effect, promulgate their own Freedom of Information Act, which was contrary to some of the things in our state Freedom of Information law. And fortunately, it was struck down by someone with a little sense very quickly. But the idea that any entity could say, well, we're independent, so we'll just write our own law and set it up any way we want to, and we're not answerable to the state statute that governs other agencies. And as a citizen, I have a problem with that, and as a legislator, I have a problem with someone in any agency that says, well, the state law doesn't apply to us.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, that was really shocking. I knew it was politically doomed, but the very idea that someone would be so foolish and arrogant as to put something like that forward was very surprising to me.
We're talking with Senator Mark Johnson. I know it's a long way until 2021 when the next legislative session happens, but you got any ideas that you're thinking about for the next legislative session?
Well, Paul, and we've talked about this on your show before, I believe of the things that I set out in 2019 to do, I've still got unfinished business. That I had some ethics legislation primarily aimed at putting some teeth in our pension law, where someone is convicted of a felony arising out of something they did in the line of duty, that they lose their state pension. And I was just of the impression that would be popular and it would sail through. And frankly, the Senate and House leadership put together a package of bills and asked me to add mine as part of that package. And then it got complicated, and then it got sticky, and then we got actuaries involved, and it just, the bureaucracy, it just kind of got bogged down in the mud. I learned a lot about how the retirement bills and the retirement committee operate kind of on a different timetable. The committee only meets once a week, and I was unable to get those bills passed. I actually had one that would, my original bill would apply to everyone, all pensions and state pensions. The leadership asked if I would cut that into two bills, and the package bill would be the one affecting legislators and constitutional officers. I did have a separate bill that would cover all other state employees. I was not able to get either one of those passed. So those are going to be two of my top priorities for 2021. And we will have an interim study, I hope. It's been approved by the Retirement Committee to study this, and maybe we can answer some of the objections or tweak it to where it does its intended purpose but doesn't create any unintended consequence.
Senator Mark Johnson, it's always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you for the history lesson. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Call anytime. Look forward to visiting with you.
All right. Yes, sir. Me too. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. Going to reset. Going to be back here with your meme of the day in just a moment. It's a doozy. Back in a minute.
Immediately, there was an ambulance on its way from Searcy when the fourth ambulance that's in Heber Springs was put into play. Not shortly after that one, the next ambulance, a call came in for Cleveland County because summer's really busy with all the tourists here, for a fifth ambulance, and it immediately was already on the way, a sixth ambulance on the way to Cleveland County to make sure we were covered. Survival Flight doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, Jackie. Cleveland County, I've just got some people sounding off here. Is it one of those areas? I mean, because of the lake and because of the mountains and everything. I mean, is ground ambulance like is an air evac kind of the only viable option? Or I mean, obviously you're saying there's ground service now, right?
Yeah, there's ground service now. I mean, but Heber Springs is also a retirement area. So the average age of our citizens in Cleveland County is over 65.
Mm-hmm.
So your stroke, heart attack, whatever. Our hospital here is a triage center. Everybody is sent down to Little Rock via air evac.
Yeah.
So it's not just boating accidents, or they fall off Sugarloaf Mountain, or we had a drowning the other day in Greersbury Lake, or things like that happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's serious health issues that happen that require air evac. But there's a difference in ground ambulance, too. There's a basic life support, which just, triages the person until they can get a paramedic there or get them to a hospital. And there's also an advanced life support, which is the paramedic or the EMT personnel. And that's what North Star provides and has been providing for the last 19 years. Now, Survival Flight will provide EMT ambulances for the 4 ambulances that they are going to service. But what happens if all 4 ambulances are in service and then you get a 5th call? Their response is to provide a helicopter at over $40,000 to the cost.
All right, I got a last question, Jackie, because we got to go. So, do you think though that that there will be some plan moving forward?
Where
they'll fix
thanks
this.
for the question.
Yeah.
Well, we have a petition circulating because you have the right to referendum any city council vote to overturn it. So we need 350 signatures on our petition to get this vote overturned. That stops everything. Then the election will be November the 12th, and if the citizens vote to overturn the vote of the city council, then they have to start all over again, which then they would have to extend North Star's contract or franchise. So that's what we're working on right now. So if you're listening from Heber Springs, please, if you're approached with a petition, please sign the petition so we can overturn this vote.
All right.
And get some sanity back in this situation.
All right, Jackie, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for giving us that update, and thank you for filing those FOIA requests and attempting to hold people accountable. They do. It's a great law. We appreciate it, Jackie.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back. Robert on Facebook. Red flag laws are an attempt to further erode our rights and make the Constitution irrelevant. It's about government increasing their control over us. They want total control over every aspect of our lives. They will continue in small steps until the goal is achieved. I don't want I don't want a law allowing a bureaucrat to deprive me of my rights, especially my right of self-defense. Let's see here. Dennis writing, small steps is the key. Just enough to move the load, but not enough for people to revolt. interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, a lot of these comments. Obviously, you guys are frustrated with the idea. The president being open to red flag laws. I mean, we've got certain Republicans. The Governor Asa Hutchinson has said that he was open to red flag laws at one time. Took a lot of heat for that. I mean, I don't understand how you do it without violating most of the Bill of Rights. Fourth Amendment, the right to a trial, your Second Amendment, obviously. Somebody's like, I think you don't need to have your guns. So you have to go before a judge and prove that you're innocent before there's not even, it's just suspicion. It is, red flag laws are based on the premise of the science fiction movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. Have you ever seen Minority Report, Joe? Okay, well, you're just a baby. You're just young. But it was a hit movie, and it was about, you had these precogs that were, soaking in a tub. Come to think of it, it's very much like Battlestar Galactica kind of built on that. If you watch the reimagining of BSG, which is top 5 television show of all time, Battlestar Galactica, fantastic. The newer one with Edward James Olmos. Anyway, so it's basically pre-crime. You have the pre-crime division, and they just show up and arrest somebody. We're like, oh, you were about to murder your wife because the telepaths foresaw it. And that sounds crazy, but it's like the exact same. I mean, there are some people that think we can, start to do this with, social media monitoring and stuff, and they can predict who's going to do what. I'll tell you this much. When it comes to all we really need to do, I mean, if we're really going to focus on this, be nice to our, be nice to our elected officials, and when we're talking to them and everything, we need to really talk about the idea, what's the concept of a right versus what's the concept of a privilege. And when it comes to this, when it comes to the natural God-given right of self-preservation, that's what we're talking about. It's not just guns, it's self-preservation. It's property, privacy, the right to defend yourself. Those are not dispensations from government. They're from our Creator. They're from God. We need to be very careful about being so, you hear Mark Johnson talking about how, well, there was a big scandal in the highway department and we got emotional and we maybe overreacted. Well, there was a big scandal in the game and fish or wildlife, and so we overreacted. We need to be very careful about these mass shootings. Yes, they are happening. The answer is less gun-free zones. And it's not having more restrictions. It's not. Now, do we have mental health? Yeah. Do we have a psychotic problem? Some people want to talk about the drugs I see here, that the antipsychotic drugs, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. But for the life of me, most every one of these mass shooters, the people knew, and in some cases they didn't say anything. And if they're not saying anything now, what makes you think they're going to say something? If a red flag law isn't, like, how many people are going to know, oh, you can go to a judge? I mean, we need to fix other problems, like, yes, mental health overall. I like the idea of a publicity campaign. I like the idea of, trying to fix what happened in Valonia. In Valonia, they had this kid who was making these ridiculous claims on social media, and guess what? They acted because there were reports, and the parents or the school was say, okay, you can't come back, you're out. And then they get sued, and the judges say, you got to take the kid back for a period. I mean, we need to fix that kind of nonsense. Well, the kid has rights. Not if he's, threatening. It's ridiculous. And by the way, that happens all across the country, where people, when they do try to act, they're not allowed to act, right? Because then all of a sudden you give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I'd much rather deny someone mistakenly, being able to go to school. Like, oops, we shouldn't have done that, than I would deny them their ability to defend themselves. Here's your meme of the day, and it's a doozy, courtesy of 4 _ touchdowns. How to get a free ride on a plane with Bill Clinton and friends. It's a picture of a guitar, and the guy is holding the chord for B minor. We'll post it on Conduit News Twitter at Conduit News. Enjoy this one, folks. It's a doozy.